Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Adrian Becker. I'm the Director of Microsoft Security Services and also CISO with a number of organizations. What we'll be covering today is securing your Microsoft 365 Copilot and also managing risky AI inside the organization. Part of the challenge we're seeing is as more organizations have AI, they are thinking more around the security and compliance side of the organizations. For today's agenda, we'll be running through the latest news. We'll go through some of the Copilot Control system, Defender for Cloud Apps, and also more of a deep dive around Purview, what features we should use in AI regarding reference compliance and Purview. I think Microsoft news, there's so much that's happening every day, but I wanted to bring out a few items that I wanted to make people available. The donations to charity, the 10 licenses you get as part of Business Premium donations, this will stop now officially on the 1st of July. So at your next renewal, you will not be entitled to the 10 free Business Premium licenses and will need to add them on again and pay for them. Also, the Microsoft 365 E1 donations will be stopping the free licenses. From the 1st of July, you will be getting this Business Basic available up to 300 licenses, but as we mentioned, Business Premium will need to be purchased. The good news as well, Microsoft has now launched a 3-year license agreement on CSP. This is effectively to replace the enterprise agreements, which helps lock your price in for 3 years. And you can, again, you are committed to those licenses. You can up over the term, but you can't downgrade at the moment. So we will watch the space, but this is launching on the 1st of June. And I believe for CSP partners that will be able to add it on around the 9th of June, you'll be able to add it on. What they've also got is incentive for anybody who's upgrading to Microsoft 365 E5 on 3 years. There will be a 10% discount if you're upgrading your M365 E3s or your Business Premium to Microsoft 365 E5 for that 3-year period. So this is a great time to take full advantage of the new 3-year agreements and get an additional discount that you can lock in. And finally, in Purview, one piece of news that caught my eye is the fact that we'll be able to apply watermarks to PDFs directly via Purview. It won't be able to edit those watermarks in other applications, but I'm thinking for organizations where Purview data security is important, being able to apply the watermarks will be a fantastic new feature around compliance. And keep watching the space. There's so much announcements currently happening, but wanted to make aware of it because that's one that I've been personally wanting for a while around how do I watermark PDFs when it's inside the organizations via Purview. I think before we start deep diving, I just wanted to run through some of the pieces of data and information we're going to be covering today. With the Business Premium license, which is normally aimed at the sub 300 organizations, you get a significant number of security features included. For example, Intune, Entra, ID, Azure Information Protection, which we'll be discussing, and also your Defender for Business. But we're seeing a number of organizations moving more and more to the Business Premium as it's such a fantastic license for less than £18 per user per month. Now, Microsoft has recently announced that you can add the Microsoft 365 security add-on. This significantly increases the coverage and security, which brings full enterprise features now to your Microsoft Business 365 Premium subscription. That means you'll get your full Entra ID plan 2, your Defender for Identity if you're still running on-premise Active Directory, the Advanced Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Office Plan 2, which gives you the additional threat intelligence, additional logs, and also the full version of Microsoft Defender for Cloud Applications, which I wanted to mention. As you will see as we go through it, we will be touching on Defender for Cloud Apps in securing your risky AI today. But what you will notice that's currently missing is the ability to add Microsoft 365 E5 compliance to your Business Premium license. But I'm made aware that this is possibly coming down the road, so we will keep an eye on that regarding what has been added onto for the future. But Really, if you're going to be securing your AI, you need something like M365 E5 security and the compliance add-on. And I think this screen, I'm not going to ask you to try and read it. I'm not going to try and do it. You'll get a copy of the slides and you can magnify it because there's so much to pop onto one page. But what you will see is by adding the security add-on, you get significant improvements regarding features that is added onto it. And as I say, you can study this afterwards, have a look at it in more detail. But this was just a great feature list of everything that's changed and what the security complements for you from a point of view by adding on the 365 E5 security onto your existing business premium license. And I think, for example, areas that you want to be looking at for inside this is the Defender for Cloud Apps, because with Business Premium, you can only discover the applications, but being able to put the E5 security on, you can create governance around that. You can create security around those areas and block those applications. As I was saying, the Microsoft 365 Copilot security that you need is absolutely critical to help govern the security around 365. So with having Copilot, you definitely need to think about how do we add the Microsoft 365 E5 compliance and the Microsoft 365 E3, E5 security. And I think areas that I want to touch on, for example, is removing site access, prevent Copilot from processing sensitive files, for example, block Copilot to specific labels. All of that is very much included in your Microsoft 365 E5 compliance license. And it's no surprise, as I like to say, it's hidden behind a paywall, a bit like Sky. You want the sports channels, you've got to pay for the additional features. But what they do have done now is they are including more features in the Microsoft 365 Copilot basic license, which I will cover off as we move through into the sessions. As I said, any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to ask. For a number of organizations we work with, we get asked, well, where do we start? How do we understand where we are? And I think this is what we would want to be able to do, is have a cybersecurity assessment. We can help you with that. We will help map up what the status are regarding your current security assessment in your environment. How does that map around your Microsoft 365? How does it map around Copilot? And this is just an example on the status map that we've done for organizations that you can map out regarding what is your status around threat protection, security, endpoint, and identity and access management. If you haven't looked at it, look at the cybersecurity assessment from Softworks. We only get positive feedback from customers who's gone through that exercise. But again, this is a great place to start if you haven't thought about where do I start from a security point of view. And I think for a lot of organizations, they do say we're about to go on our Copilot journey. We've got Microsoft 365. We want to embrace data labeling, data taxonomy, but where do we start? And the only reason I've got the next two slides in this deck is to say you need a data taxonomy if you are going to be looking after data, managing data loss prevention, and are being serious about securing your data in the long term. Without some sort of data taxonomy, it's going to be almost impossible to create proper data hygiene, data security inside your organizations. And for numerous businesses, we're all very good at securing business premium or securing the endpoint, leveraging the technology, but you've got to think about how do we want to embrace data inside the organization? How are we going to be classifying that information, and how are we going to be securing that on an ongoing basis? And I think this is what you've got to think about. And Microsoft has made them much simpler taxonomy where they've mapped out a lot of the information for you if you haven't have the ability to adopt it yourself. But as I say, from a point of view, you'll be able to see what there is. And I think site labels for external sharing with partners, that is specifically, for example, with SAM licenses, which you now get as part of Copilot, and we will be covering that as well as we move along. But have a look at this from a point of view, the data taxonomy, map that out. And once you've mapped out the data taxonomy, think about how you're going to be embracing and securing your data via Purview. And I think for organizations, Purview is a little bit scary. It's such a big project, but start your journey. It's very quick where you can apply a basic labeling, basic data loss prevention without too much interruption to the organizations. Just label your data and set some basic data loss prevention policies for any new content created. That might not fix your existing current data, but it will start dealing with your information moving forward. Again, we can cover this off in more detail or speak to your account managers, but there's hours of work sometimes involved. This takes a long time for a lot of organizations, but again, you've got to think about it and how you'll be adopting your data classification inside the organization. Now, getting back to Copilot and why we're actually here for the webinar, for a lot of organizations, they may or may not be aware, but if you go to admin.microsoft.com, you'll be able to, and you are an administrator, you'll be able to access the Copilot Control system. And this will give you a quick view of what's happening inside your organization, how many licenses you've got, what users have been signed, how many of them are actually using it on an ongoing basis. And this is just a great way to see what's happening in the organization. But the areas that I really wanted to touch on is under settings. And if we look at settings, for example, is what information do you have in here, what security can you turn on, and you've got things here, for example, are you going to set up your pay-as-you-go billing, which is very much for where you've created agents and you want to pay 1 penny per message as you move along, for example, with your agents, or also a couple of areas like the self-service purchases, which is absolutely critical to think about who you're going to allow to buy Copilot licenses inside your organization. I fundamentally have an issue with this license, of this feature, but Microsoft has put it in, and sometimes they do want to make it easy for people to adopt Microsoft. But there's a number of settings in here that you can have a look at. And the ones that I wanted to highlight specifically is the self-service trials and purchases. Make sure you're going to set it to do not allow users to buy the product on their own. A lot of organizations do allow trials, but from your point of view, think about what you want to do. Really, only the admin should be allowed to buy Copilot. So normally my recommendation is just do not allow self-service purchases, full stop. And then think about who you're going to allow, who can use agents inside the organization. Is specific groups? Do you want to set it that only specific users can as you deploy it or roll it out, or can anybody use agents inside the organizations? And again, this is to allow who can access the agents. Anybody with a Copilot license can create an app, but think about what security you're going to put in place. Who do you want to access those agents? And it might be that you're deploying new agents that you're trialing inside the organizations. You want to put it available, and you might want to publish those to specific groups. But these are two of the settings that's available. There's more settings in the Copilot control system. It's relatively basic. Go and have a look at it. But these are the two that I wanted to highlight. Now, lots of information already, but I think this is the one that I do find surprising that a lot of organizations don't know. In December, Microsoft announced that they'll be making available SharePoint Advanced Management, or SAM, as it's referred to, as part of your Copilot license. This used to be about $3 per user per month in the past. I think that's roughly what the price was. So for a number of organizations who adopted SharePoint, this was always a feature they wanted, but could not always afford. The great news is Microsoft has now included this as part of your subscription. What is interesting is you don't need to license all the users. So even if not all the users have Copilot, everybody can benefit from the SharePoint Advanced Management. And again, you can access that via the SharePoint portal or admin portal under SharePoint Advanced Management. And you'll see that there's significant number of items here on the menu. For example, blocked download policy for SharePoint and OneDrive. Well, that is very much aimed at if you have a specific site or specific data in SharePoint that is absolutely critical, you're really worried about that information being lost, or data loss prevention that you want to implement, you can set that up that to access that SharePoint site, it can't be synced, it can't be downloaded, it can only be accessed via the browser version and not even utilized with a full version of Office. So again, a fantastic feature where data is needed to be secure, that is critical to the business. You've also got things like change history to understand what changes has been made inside the organization. This is quite useful if somebody comes to you and say, my site's broken, and you don't know what happened, or you've been away, you want to understand what's happened, you can go and view the change history. The next one, conditional access policies. Very much again, conditional access policy that is context-based conditional access. So we all know you get Entra ID Plan 2, which gives you full conditional access to access sites, but you can then leverage conditional access policies to SharePoint and OneDrive that says, for example, if we're accessing this site in this context, it's got to be from a compliant machine or a specific group of machines or users. So you can create policies in a specific context that applies only to that SharePoint site or OneDrive site. Again, very much useful from a point of view. The other bit that we'll touch on is data access governance. Again, you'll be able to see, is there oversharing that's happening? Who's got access to data? What's the default sensitivity labels for document libraries? And you can create those as well. And you can see site level access restrictions. Again, what do you want to do? Do you want to include it in Copilot? But there's a significant number of features that's available in it. Now, with SharePoint Advanced Management, as I say, again, you can go and click on a site, you can see what the site is in, but you'll get this restrict content from Microsoft 365 Copilot. You'll notice that is a pro license that's included for free. So if you have content that you want to exclude from Microsoft 365 as SharePoint site, you can go and turn that on, and that will be excluded from Microsoft Copilot, bringing back in the information relating to that particular site. Same with site access is available from the settings. Now, the data governance report under reporting, again, some of these are available in normal SharePoint, but you'll be able to see what links has been shared, what sensitivity labels, and then the one that's important, content shared with everyone except external users. This is a great way when you look at the reports to understand, have you got data that's shared with everyone that you weren't aware of? We see organizations worry about the information they have. It's not that Copilot is bringing in new security risks, it's amplifying your existing security risks. So organizations do find that useful. And then lastly, the activity regarding SharePoint agents inside your SharePoint sites. That is SharePoint Advanced Management. If you haven't looked at it, go look at it. Even if you've got one Copilot license, it is turned on at the moment. Don't know if they'll change that in the future, but from your point of view right now, you get that features, all the features that was available as of December last year. They are still working away on how they're going to keep charging users for the SharePoint Advanced Management, so they'll probably bring in more features that will be hidden about the $3 license, but for right now, take advantage of your SharePoint Advanced Management free license if you haven't done so already. Now, Defender for Cloud Apps. If you haven't seen it, it's included in Business Premium, Defender for Endpoint P1. You are able to go and view what applications are running inside your organization. The reason why I'm mentioning it is just going to go see what applications are being accessed inside a business is a great way of understanding a little bit more. Are your users accessing risky applications? Are they accessing specific technologies? So what we've got in this screen, what I've done here is I have clicked on show me the discovered app. I haven't changed the risk score. And ironically, in this screen, a risk score of 10 is good, a risk score of 1 is bad. It's completely opposite to vulnerability management. But what you'll be able to do then is select a category as well. So I have selected generative AI, and you can see then how much generative AI is being utilized inside your organization, how much traffic has been transmitted or downloaded from that specific applications, how many has been uploaded, the number of users, the IP addresses, how many different devices is accessing that particular application. And you'll be able to see all applications that's being utilized inside your organization. But where we're using AI and you want to understand, are people doing shadow AI or bringing their own AI to work? This is a great place to understand. And you will notice that as you move down, you see the risk scores. I've sorted by risk score, and we've got the various risks. Interestingly enough, at the bottom you'll see one called Venice AI, which is one that I'd like to test on. I've just seen in one of the security risk reports, they are very concerned about Venice AI because they have now turned off you are able to turn off the safety rails and generate, for example, your own ransomware code, or use it for not for good, as the saying goes. But it's interesting, we see more and more of this AI tool. So you want to think about what we are utilizing. Now, if you did have Defender for, if we had the security add-on E5, you'll be able to also go and actually sanction the application. So if you've detected that people are using applications and you don't want them to do it, you can go and create a policy that block or sanction those apps that they are unsanctioned, which means that you can block access to those particular applications inside your organization to prevent users from accessing that on the browsers by leveraging Defender for Cloud Apps. But again, speak to us if you want more details. This is a whistle-stop tour of all the features, but I wanted to make it you aware of it because for a number of organizations, they never actually just go and see what is being utilized inside the business, and it gives you great visibility regarding what is being done and what is being used extensively inside the organization. The next area to talk about is your data risk assessments. Again, this you can find under Data Security Posture Management for AI. This is turned on now for customers. It shows you your top 100 sites, and again, show you specific overexposure. It complements your SAM, the SharePoint Advanced Management, but it will show you, do you have sites being shared externally? What data is being accessed? How much of sensitive information is contained in each of the sites? So you can start thinking about, where do we have serious issues? Do we have specific risks around the business? Do we have data that we need to think about? It's a great way just to give you an overview of what's happening inside the organization and what your top 100 sites looks like from a volume point of view. And it will help you find data potentially that's not needed, or information that you weren't even aware that exists. It was in preview, it's just come out of preview in the beginning of May. We do find every now and again some unique, shall we say, issues around the accuracy of the report. For example, items access is not always populating correctly, but you can also create your own custom assessment around certain users, certain sites, etc., that you want to have a look at the site. The other area that I want to highlight as well in the data security posture management for AI is the activity log. The Activity Explorer will show you what activity is taking place on every day. You can go and see what interactions was viewed. So, for example, how many times there was interaction, was there specific AI websites visited, and you can go and see what activity it was in more detail regarding the questions being asked, for example. Again, from a security point of view, this is a great area to understand what are your users doing. Are they using potentially other AI applications? But also, when you need to deal with compliance, what information has been requested, what's been accessed, you can go and see the actual activity that's in place. Again, this is more for your compliance officers, your compliance managers, not necessarily for all of your users or your normal IT admin staff to look at. A few other bits and pieces that I just want to highlight, again, for data security posture management for AI. To get the full accurate view and implement full data loss prevention beyond edge, you do need to deploy the Purview plugin for the browser. That can be deployed to Firefox, Chrome. Go ahead, deploy that, make sure the plugin exists, but it will then give you more detailed review beyond the Defender for Endpoint regarding what AI apps are being accessed, what data is being accessed on a day-to-day basis. And you will then be able to create data loss prevention policies that says, I might want to stop certain labeled folders or classified documents from being uploaded into what we would call risky AI sites. With this, then, by having this in place, you can create your policies to block data being uploaded or certain content being uploaded to AI generative engines. And you've got things like audit or block with override. So, for example, what that means really is you can say just report what data is being uploaded so we can understand, block it, but give the ability to override, or just block it in general when it documents labeled as highly sensitive, for example. Next areas to think about as well is auditing. Again, what you can do is set up audits in Copilot so you can understand what activity is taking place. You want to view potentially who's created an agent, who accessed Copilot, what type of files are being accessed in Copilot, what type of information is being accessed. This will very much just give you a report of what information is being accessed, not like the DSPM, which actually shows you the results, the questions being answered. This is more to audit activities, who's created an agent, which is different from the interaction that we saw in DSPM for AI. You can see who modified it, who created it. There's a large number of activities you can search for. Normally I recommend you work through the activities friendly names, as this is the best area to, as it's pre-populated with a lot of the fields. But if not, you can actually create more detailed, look for values, etc. Other areas that we've got is communication compliance to have in place. So, for example, in communication compliance, you can create the unethical behavior monitoring in the AI Hub. Let's look for specific communications or risks that you want to look for. But these are communications or risky AI activity that is being undertaken inside Copilot. And I think from your point of view, things to think about is who will be reviewing these communications. Do you want to check every one that flags up as risky because you know what, you might be getting lots of false positive? How do you want to deal with OCR where images are involved? Which classifiers? What are you going to be using? Are you going to be using their built-in classifiers? Are you going to use your own trainable classifiers? And who do you want to monitor? Is it just your AI users or is it all of your staff? It's all of these areas to think about. And this then comes back to what is the policy that you have around the communication compliance? And that's what's key. What is your AI policy inside the organization? Make sure you've got it published. Make sure you have it in place, because if you do not have an AI policy, you are looking for challenges down the road where you monitor it. And in a few of the sessions I've done before, people have questions, well, is it legal to monitor what people are doing? Well, currently in most staff handbooks, we say we have the right to look at emails. This is no different from interaction with AI engines. It's still happening on a work laptop, and where you have an incident, you might need to investigate that. And I think the insider risk management is another triggered alert. So what we've got here is I've asked you to trigger an event where users browse to a potentially risky website. So again, you can see here I've asked you to send out a trigger when people browse to a new generative AI website, which then comes back to the cloud apps security, where you can create policies that says block, sanction. But again, from an insider risk management, we can be notified when users are accessing potentially risky or new generative AI. And it's what you just got to remember, if you do not give them the ability, either via the Copilot free or the version that most people get with their M365 or business premium licenses, or give them another tool, users will go and find their own websites. And we've got to remember, every single phone these days are an AI device by default. So it's all of the direct messaging apps, they've all got it built in. So you just got to think about, how do we give our users the guidance? What do I want to know? And what action are we going to take if we do discover this risky websites? And I think you need to think about what's your policy, how you're going to enforce it, and that guidance that you've got to provide around to users. But leverage the insider risk management to understand what we can do. And again, this is a feature of M365 E5 compliance. We've also got e-discovery, and again, we've got the new e-discovery, but you want to be looking for what interactions has taken place. Where do you want to look for those items? What information is available? Again, this is normally where we have not a subject access request, but where we have some sort of case or incident that we need to investigate. All the information is recorded inside the system. So if you've got the e-discovery license or M365 E5 with the e-discovery premium or the new experience, you'll be able to go and find the information regarding all the interactions people had regarding Copilot, for example, what they've leveraged it for, where they leveraged it, what information they got given back, which then helps build the case where there's been potentially unauthorized access or there's a potential risk around data that's been seen that should not have been seen. This is where data wasn't secured properly and you suddenly have a potential breach or insider risk information where oversharing of information has occurred. Being able to discover that and categorically understand what's been viewed helps significantly. And as you can see, I've run a query here for Copilot and Microsoft 365 and interactions just to understand what interactions has taken place between on that specific system. Now, just before we go to questions and answers, because I know I've covered a lot of their high level, I do want to mention again the data taxonomy in more detail, because I think for a lot of users, they still struggle around what it is. And I think what you've got to think about your data is, how do we go about labeling that information? How do we secure that information? So for example, you might have a list of special projects that you run, and if a user type in the name or generate a new document with that special project name, you can have a classifier that will automatically apply a label to that document to say that it is confidential, and then you can create your data loss prevention policies around that. But I think for organizations, we are seeing more and more on a day-to-day basis that ability to classify information automatically, not relying on the user to do that. Having SharePoint sites that applies that label, that we can create some data loss prevention policies around it, is becoming more critical. Previously, it was all about securing the perimeter, securing the device, the zero trust. The next level up from that is, once you've completed securing the device and the systems, you've got to think about, how do we secure the data? And all of this AI is done is really make that more critical to the business about securing the information, securing the data, labeling the data, creating that taxonomy. And I'm conscious I've rushed through a lot of these slides. Normally I would spend more time on it, but there was so much information to run through, wanted to touch on these high level. More than happy to have a much more in-depth conversation, share some live environments, live views for anybody who's more interested. But these are the main areas that you've got to think of. And I think what you've probably highlighted or seen highlighted during this session is significant part of this information is part of the M365 E5 compliance, part of the solution. Purview, that's where a lot of the security sits. That doesn't mean that you must forget about your normal Entra ID, your conditional access, zero trust to log on, because that's where everything starts. But my view very much is, let's get the foundations right, and then we concentrate on how do we secure the data, because with Copilot, it just becomes more and more embraced and adopted across organizations. And one of the policies, for example, with the labeling policies, you could create a label that gets applied that excludes the Copilot button inside that document, or prevents Copilot from ever accessing or viewing that document if it's got that particular label on. So just beyond going beyond the SharePoint site, excluding it from Copilot, you can start excluding certain labels from Copilot as well. But again, you can talk to us if you want to understand more how to implement these policies, because some of the features and settings does include PowerShell, and it's not just menu driven. I'm conscious I've done a lot of talking. We've coming up to about 37 minutes. What I would now like to do is give the last 5-8 minutes to questions and answers. If you've got, feel free to type it into the section. I will now just look and see what questions have been made available, if any, so far. Just looking at any questions. Does help? No. When can we actually start purchasing the M365 E5 add-on? Well, that is available immediately. So for the people who not aware, as I said in the beginning, E5 security can be added to Business Premium immediately. Unfortunately, the compliance not yet. I believe watch the space, and that will be added on shortly. Just seeing if there's any other questions. I'll give it one more minute for questions, but speak to us, think about how you want to do it. But as I said in the beginning, think about how you're gonna go about your security. Sign up to the Microsoft security assessment, speak to the account managers. They can give you sample reports, but we found for most organizations, they really appreciate and understand the value of those reports. We've got a significant number of future events. Feel free to sign up to those. We run in-person workshops that can be found on the Softworks events page. We will be running another CISO workshop on the 25th of June. Join us. We will be at InfoSec next week. For the people who is attending, please come and find us. But there's loads of material going out on that. But on that note, if there's any final questions, I'll give it a minute. Thank you very much for joining me. Feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn or send me an email directly. As I said, the slides will be made available after the session. And thank you very much for joining us. I think I've got one more question. But I've got a statement from somebody who says, where do we start? The brain feels a bit fried. Where do we start? I think from a point of view is get one Copilot license, get yourself access to the SharePoint Advanced Management, understand how much data you have, start off with a security assessment and talk to people regarding what you're looking to achieve. For a number of organizations that I work with, I recommend start off with an agent to help understand the power of what Copilot can do. What are those business adoptions? If you go to adoption.microsoft.com, there's significant scenarios of where Copilot can work. But I think for organizations, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. My view is think about embracing AI. Where are we going to start? How are we going to adopt it? How are we going to use it? And also it starts off with your AI policy. Explain to the users you've given them Copilot for the web, or Copilot as Microsoft likes to confuse everybody, but I'm going to call it Copilot for the web, which is the normal chat version, which goes off to the internet and finds information. That will be a great way to start. All the data in there is secure. It is covered by Microsoft. It's not being trained on, and that should be your default that you make available to all users, which also means that you can start seeing what people are doing on a day-to-day basis inside the web and what they're using it for. But you've got to be clear, what is our policy guidelines regarding using AI in the business? The next step then is to think about, if we are going to adopt the Microsoft 365 Copilot inside the organizations or a different AI engine, how do we secure the data? What data do we want to expose? And I'll give a simple version of an agent I created. Create an agent, upload a SharePoint site or a document into the agent to give it some knowledge, and we use it to deal with all of our ISO compliance questions, where somebody says, what's your policy on safeguarding, whistleblowing, for example. Upload all of the compliance documents, which means that when somebody needs to respond to a compliance question, they can ask that of the agent quickly, get the relevant document that is current, correct, and provide the answer, because it is a big journey, but it starts with really security, secure your user access, and then secure your data. But as I mentioned, feel free to speak to us. We can help guide it. It sounds scarier than it is. And for most organizations, once they adopt it, once they get the basic foundation sorted out, they really do see the value in specific functions. And I'm going to be clear, not necessarily for everybody in the organization, but specific functions benefits from a full Copilot license, whereas a large number of users benefits from the agents. And as I've seen recently, they believe that all humans are going to become managers of agents. So we'll all have agents doing the legwork, and we'll just be managing the agents, these AI agents, to make sure they're doing the right thing that they're supposed to do. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate you joining me today. I hope you found that useful. As I say, join us for the next version, the next session on the 25th. There'll be email be going out. I believe it might be intra private access, but we will continue. We'll confirm that in the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much. Look forward to you joining us. Have a nice day.